Hello and welcome back. I'm your host for today's exciting live event, the fourth of our 6 weekly LinkedIn Live workshops, Unlock the Power of Jobs to be Done. I'm Brent Schmidt, a partner in Agile Innovation Advisors. Make sure to watch our first 3 sessions and see the links in the comments section. We hope you're enjoying this series. We're having a lot of fun. In the last session, we focused on defining what a job is, and today we'll be looking at job mapping. Remember to participate in the discussion. Drop your comments and questions in the comment section. Don't have to wait till the end of the presentation to do that. We will get to them, of course, at the end. But for now, I'm handing it over to Zach. What do you got for us, Zach?
All right. Thank you, Brent. And welcome back, everybody. Again, I'm Zach Lyons, Managing Partner of Agile Innovation Advisors. So to recap from our previous 3 sessions, now that we know why jobs to be done is important for seeing your customers and their needs differently, the audience you are creating value for, and what functional, emotional, and social jobs are, what do we do next to uncover innovation and growth opportunities? The first step is to map out the activities the customer must do to get the core functional job done. And we call this a job map. This is not a process map that shows what they are doing. Rather, it shows what they are trying to get done to successfully complete the job. It really represents how customers would ideally get the job done if they could do it perfectly. And look, we don't construct this on our own, but through discussions with customers. Mapping the job is important because it acts as a guide for gathering needs, which we will be covering extensively next week, so stay tuned. Much like an outline assists us when writing an essay, it helps us to make sure that we have an end-to-end view of what the customer is trying to get done and that we have captured all the customer needs for a given job. Many product and marketing leaders fall into the trap of thinking the job is just what their product does. However, most customer jobs are broader than that and often are where the most opportunity to innovate exists. The job map forces us to think about the broader job. We know from studying job maps over the years that there are 9 universal steps that you can see here. They are not always called this, and they are not always in this order. However, they can help guide us to make sure we are not missing any key job steps. If you remember from last week, we used the example of consumers opening a new account at a financial institution. So continuing with this example this week, let's look at the job map for this job through the lens of the universal job steps. So first, consumers must define their new account needs. Then they gather information about different types of accounts, prepare to apply for a new account, choose a method to use to apply for a new account, provide information and sign documents needed to apply, monitor the process of opening the new account, resolve an issue with opening a new account, and then finally get a question answered about opening a new account. So one thing you'll notice is that the universal job steps help us to make sure we capture each step in this job. This should feel very logical and organized and be a complete picture of what the job entails. You should also notice in this example that the execute step in the middle there has multiple job steps consumers are trying to get done, while the universal job step modify is not applicable in this case. That's okay. The universal job map is just a guide to help us make sure we do not miss any key steps. So don't get trapped into thinking that it is always one-to-one. There will be more on this in a minute. But first, going back to our customer jobs hierarchy from last week, and if you missed that, I suggest you queue up that video and take a look. I want to show you where the job steps fit in. They are sub-jobs to the core functional job. Yes, they are jobs and follow all the same criteria of a good job statement that we discussed in depth last week. However, we call them job steps to distinguish them from the related functional jobs. And as you can tell, jobs follow a hierarchy. As we go down the hierarchy, we are asking the question, what must be done to get the core functional job done perfectly? Remember, the core functional job is the job we are studying. In this example, what must be done to successfully open a new account? And as we go up the hierarchy, we are asking the question, what does this job enable? For example, opening a new account enables you to save money for the future, finance the purchase of a home, earn additional income, etc. So exploring this hierarchy, as well as the jobs customers are doing before and after the core functional job, helps you to gain a full picture of what customers are doing and identify new opportunities for innovation. Here's a template we use to help us define the steps of a core functional job utilizing the Universal Customer Job Map. We're happy to share this with you, so if you're interested, just please let us know in the comments and we'll make sure we get it to you. So for each universal job step, we have a set of questions we like to ask customers so we can capture what they are trying to get done. We have a choice, though, in how we use this. We can go through this sequentially with customers, starting with the define at the top and working our way through the universal job steps. Or we can determine what the execute steps mean for the job in the heart of the job, and then work our way backwards and forward from there. Really, either way works. For our example, open a new account, we first ask customers what must be defined or known to open a new account and learn that they must define their new account needs. Seems obvious. We then discussed what must be located, gathered, accessed, or retrieved, either physically or informationally, for customers to open a new account, and found that they gather information about different types of accounts, again, before they even open a new account. We then asked what must be prepared, set up, examined, or evaluated. And there wasn't one thing they were doing, but several pieces of information like their driver's license. So we captured this as prepare to apply for a new account. We continued working through each set of questions with customers to identify the job steps around what must be confirmed, and then what is at the heart of getting the job done. So one thing to keep in mind is that the job steps are from the point of view of the customer, not the company providing the solution. It's another trap people fall into. So even though a bank may be determining whether to open a new account for the customer, they have some kind of decision process, this is not something the customer must do, and thus is not part of their job map. So you have to be very clear on who the job executor, again, we covered that way back in session 2. So if you haven't seen that, go check that out as well, and what job they're trying to get done. We know that job mapping is not easy, especially if you haven't done it before. So here are some tips and tricks we've learned along the way. First, only functional jobs can be deconstructed into steps. Emotional and social jobs, they don't have steps. Many, but not all jobs follow a chronological flow, as we just saw. So in other words, it's a logical sequence step by step over time, and this can help us to map jobs more easily. Job maps, as I pointed out earlier, are not process maps. They don't show what the customer is doing, but what they ideally must do to get the job done. So if you interview 10 people, you'll likely get 10 different ways people do the job. That's a process. A job map would show universally what all 10 of them are trying to do. And lastly, there is not always a one-to-one correlation between the universal job map steps and steps in a specific customer job map. We talked about that earlier, but it is something to keep in mind. So we hope that you now understand what a job map is and how to construct one for the core functional job you are studying. See if you can create a job map for a simple job that you, as a job executor, are trying to do in your life for practice. For example, obtain a haircut. And don't forget to think about it from end to end. Next week, we'll dive into discussing what is a need in the context of jobs to be done. And this is where the rubber meets the road, as they say, in jobs to be done. So happy now to open it up to questions and answers.
Yeah, if you have a question, please put it in the comments and see if we can answer it for you. While we're waiting for potential questions, I have a couple of questions. You mentioned, if you're new at job mapping, so let's think about that. If I was new to this, again, some people watching this might be. Where would you start? How would you get going with this? Give me some practical first steps.
Yeah, it's a good question. So as a practitioner, one of the things that we always do is some secondary research to get familiar with the job, and typically doing some searches, reading articles. However, obviously with the advent of tools like ChatGPT and AI, generative AI, it can be a good place to start. And I know that's something a lot of people are dabbling with in the jobs to be done world. However, I wouldn't end there, right? So something like ChatGPT can give you a good set of ideas of what's involved with a job. But really what you need to do then is recruit a handful of customers, let's say 5 to start, and using that template we just walked through, ask these customers the questions. What's involved in each of the steps? What are they trying to do? Customers are going to talk about, again, what they do, and you have to dig deep to understand what they're trying to get done. And those questions in our template should help with that. The other thing I've found that works quite well is once you feel like maybe you're 80% of the way there, or feel like you have a decent job map, you can share it with these potential customers as target audience and say, what do you think? Is it logical? Does it make sense? Am I missing anything? What do you do? And see if there's any gaps in your job map. So good question. Starting with tools outside help you kind of get going, and using customers and asking good questions to fill out that job map.
Right. Awesome. Thanks for that. And so hopefully that was helpful for others listening here. And so Nicholas has a question here. Let's look at what he has to ask us here. How granular should you go with each step?
This is an interesting question. So there's a couple of levels to this question. The first part, showing it to key stakeholders. But I want to address kind of the second part first, of how granular should you go. This is a question I get quite a bit, and is part of the art of jobs to be done, in that as you do a study, you have to manage scope. So depending on the job you're studying and how broad that job is, or how narrowly it is focused, will really dictate how granular you go. So that example we were just walking through of opening a new account is what I would describe a fairly narrow job. It's fairly contained, as you can kind of think about it. Even I've showing that hierarchy, there's higher level jobs, right? So if you're more granular in the job, you can go more specific around each of the steps and get very granular with it. As you go to a higher level job, it can encompass a lot more. It's what I would call a broader job. And so obviously if you're trying to manage scope and you're going broader, which makes sense in a lot of cases, especially if you're not sure where opportunities to innovate exist, then you may not go as granular. And the idea being, and we'll talk next week about it, but the idea being you're trying to manage how many needs you're actually going to capture. So if you end up with a job map that has 20 steps and you're going to capture, let's say 5 to 10 needs for each of those steps, you can quickly get to 200 need statements, which is a lot, right? So it's thinking in those terms about granularity as far as the scope to answer the question you're trying to answer. So if you're not sure where to innovate, I tend to start with a broader job and maybe less granular, and just to understand sort of end to end. If I want to get really deep on maybe one customer experience, like opening a new account, we can get more granular in that area. And then that really ties into the stakeholder part, which is the stakeholders obviously are trying to learn or determine something, right? And so jobs to be done helps inform that. So it goes back to what is the core question the stakeholder is trying to answer.
Mm-hmm. I like what you said about scope, and sometimes we're building a job map. We have steps, but we also put them into phases just to help organize it and to give it some structure. So in this case, for opening a new account, that's actually what we did, is put it into 4 different phases because we simplified it for our presentation today. But that's something to think about. And Nicholas has a follow-up question here for us. So thanks, Nicholas, for helping us out here with some questions today. How do you measure the success of your job map? How do you define success in this context?
Yeah. Well, the success of the whole study, of course, and I think we'll talk more in our session 6 about identifying opportunities and driving the business forward. I think this answering this more specifically in the context of needs gathering, this is very much a, to use kind of systems thinking terminology, right? It's a top down and bottom up approach, right? Where we start top down by defining the job and going through and defining those steps, as we just talked about, and getting to a point where we feel like we have something. And then in the second phase, where we go in and gather needs for each step, and again, we'll cover that in depth next week. What we sometimes learn is some steps are too high level because we'll end up with 10, 15 needs in that step. And that's usually a clue that this step is too high a level and we need to break it down into more granular steps. And vice versa. Sometimes a step is really too granular and really is just a need. So this is part of, again, the art of jobs to be done is we'll start with a job map, but we think is 80% correct. We'll go through and gather needs that we'll talk about next week. And then we look and say, okay, do we have the job map correctly? And so we're constantly sort of doing this top down and bottom up approach. The whole journey is a learning process for a jobs to be done practitioner, really trying to get inside the heads of the customer, people doing the job, and really understanding it. So I hope that answers the question.
It kind of comes back to what's the purpose or what's the job of the job map. And in some ways it is just to provide that frame to go deeper.
And so if it helps you explore the job more extensively and make sure you're not missing anything, then that makes the job map a successful job map.
Right. Okay. Nicholas is on fire today. Let's keep going with him here. Appreciate your questions, Nicholas. So how do you keep your job map up to date? And when should you update your job map?
So that goes back to one of the core tenets of jobs to be done, which is jobs are stable over time. They don't really change. Now, of course, solutions come and go, right? So what solutions we're using to help us get the job done can certainly change. But jobs, if you define them and do them right, in other words, they're independent of solutions, which we also talked about in one of our previous live sessions, then it shouldn't really change much. Now, there may be different focus areas for a job. And in fact, this example I just showed about opening a new account, I've studied twice for a client over a 5-year period. And what we did learn in doing a whole new set of interviews is, yes, the job was stable, as jobs to be done sort of espouses, but there were slightly different focuses around maybe keeping your information private as you go about opening a new account. So it wasn't necessarily that the job map had changed. In fact, I would say it didn't at all. I didn't need to update it. And I even verified that through interviews. What did change is maybe I pulled out a few or teased out a few needs that were part of the job, right, steps that were specific around keeping information private. So it wasn't like we had missed it. We just sort of had a deeper focus in that area. So they don't really change. So you shouldn't have to update them.
That makes it easy.
Like process maps, which you continuously have to look at your process and think about what you're doing. And that always is changing. So this is really a different method of mapping what people are doing. It's really like what they're trying to get done.
It's like saying when you build your house, you don't usually want to replace your foundation every 10 years.
Good analogy.
Hopefully the foundation is solid and it's perfect. And you may change your windows. But
yeah, because you may you may change the paint because you may have a different style.
Exactly.
Right. So your focus on different things can change over time, but the foundation is constant.
Yeah. Awesome.
It's a good question.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Nicholas, for making this interactive session today. So I have another follow-up question here. We talked about inexperienced or just people that are new at this, and really it's all like I've been doing this for 6+ years with you, and they're always learning something new. And so what do you see if you're looking over the shoulder of someone that's maybe inexperienced? What issues might you identify if you were to coach them? And if you're coaching people that are listening to this right now, what are some kind of things to watch out for?
Yeah, so a couple of things that we hit on lightly, but it is worth re-emphasizing here is that uh, many folks who start doing this, they tend to do a process map of what customers are doing. Customers will talk about what they're doing, A, B, and C. And so they map that out versus what they're trying to get done. So that really is about asking customers why, right? Why are you doing that? What are you trying to accomplish? And walking through using the universal job steps as a guide and walking through that and really asking why as you walk through the job. The other thing is people tend to map the job from the company's perspective. So for a product manager or a product marketing manager, we see the world through the lens of our product, which is natural. But then we think about it in terms of what the customer is doing is they're trying to learn our product and onboard our product and get familiar with the product. But that's not what customers are trying to do, right? That's what we as a product manager, product marketing managers want them to do. That's not the job. So we really have to get out of that perspective of our product or service and get into the lens of the customer and what they're doing. And then really think end to end. Some people, and I know there's a famous video from Clayton Christensen online about the milkshake. And so you ask the question, what job does a milkshake do? And the truth is, solution like a milkshake, they don't do jobs. People do jobs, right? So the milkshake is a solution to helping them do something, right? Some job done. So we want to focus on the job that they're trying to get done end to end, really broader than the solution. Think about it like opening a new account. A lot of client or a lot of banks would think, well, they hit apply and they start filling out the information. But as we saw in the example, there's a last steps that the customers have to do before they ever hit apply to get that job done perfectly. So we want to think end to end and focus on the job from the customer's perspective, not what the solution does today. It's a good question.
Good stuff. All right. I'll just close off Nicholas's question here. And Todd's just commenting here. He liked our analogy of the foundation and comparing that to his space, the Martech stack. So good to see you here,
Yeah,
Todd.
I mean, jobs to be done, it is a very much a foundational set of insights that can drive a lot of activities into the future from your roadmap, your product marketing and messaging, even your acquisition strategy. So the analogy of a house foundation is a good one because jobs to be done, I would say, is a foundational set of insights for any business.
Any more questions? We'll give you 30 seconds here to post another question. If not, we'll close our session for today. Thanks again for participating in this journey with us. This is number 4. We got 2 more to go to the end of this workshop series.
And we did put the link to the previous 3 in the comments for this live. So if you haven't seen any of the previous 3, please check them out. You can go through them in any order, although I probably would start with 1 and then go to 2 and then 3.
All right, it looks like that's our workshop for today. We really appreciate your engagement in our series and the questions you're asking. Make this a rich experience for everyone. Remember, if you do want that template, just put job map template in the comments and we'll reach out. Make sure to book the next 2 Wednesdays in your calendar, and we'll see you hopefully next week and the following week. And follow the hashtag JTBD Foundation Workshop to stay in the know. And feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn if you want to have a conversation about this or want to talk about having a customized workshop. We love introducing this concept into organizations in very practical ways. And there is a follow-up question here. Do we want to jump back into Q&A with Nicholas's question here? Why not?
Sure, let's do it.
Let's roll with it. Here, how do you share a job map with others in the organization who are not part of the research? So is the question there how to make sure that they understand and build buy-in? Was it behind that question? Is the importance of buy-in?
I mean, one of the things that comes to mind right away is that I typically will take those steps in the job and create a visual, some kind of a flow showing sort of the step-by-step of the job and explain to people who aren't involved in the research that this is a map of the ideal. So it's going to act like an outline that we're going to gather needs on. hopefully in itself, you can see like, hey, look, we only provide solutions in a few of these steps. So there may be opportunity to innovate in a broader sense, right? So I tend to like it, show it graphically, and explain that this is it's the to be. If you're into process mapping, it's the ideal state, and we're going to go gather needs on each of these steps, so we know what the customer's measures of success or their needs, which is what we'll cover here in session 5, as you can see next, are for each of those steps. Those are the two of the best practices I've found.
Right. And really building that buy-in along the way of the journey that you're on. So keeping them in the loop, and if they're not participating in it, that's fine. Obviously, we always encourage people to go for the ride and participate in the interviews, and if they have the time to do that. So that builds their buy-in, because then they've heard those job steps, or as we'll see next week, the needs within those steps. So I think that's our time for today, Zach. And again, thanks everyone for joining us. We look forward to seeing you at our next session.
Thank you.